as within any business, the more structure that remains in place with the business at the time of the sale. For example, somebody who is intimate with the properties beyond just the owner. So if they've got a property manager in place that knows the properties, knows the people, the more of those things that remain whole with the purchase, the more attractive and the larger the pool of buyers potentially is, because now I have somebody who maybe doesn't desire to buy themselves a job, basically invest money and manage from above instead of being the one managing everything. So it just expands your pool of buyers.
Welcome to another REI-NWA podcast. This is podcast number 31. I'm your host, Coley Bailey. I'm an executive broker and team leader with the Lone Rock team at Fathom Realty. And today we are going to be talking about succession planning. What happens if you've built an investment portfolio, properties or businesses maybe, and your kids don't want to take it over? What do you do with that asset? And today, I'm very excited to introduce everybody to John Green here with CBI. And thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Coley.
Yeah. Well, now we always like to, before digging into the topic too deep, we always like to meet our guest and hear a little bit about who you are and where you're from and how you got into doing what you're doing now.
Well, my name is John Green, and I'm an executive business broker with the CBI-Team, also known as Confidential Business Intermediaries. And what we do is confidentially help businesses transition to new owners. We do that in a confidential method, so as to protect the business while that process is underway. The business has been here over 30 years. It's that business nobody's ever heard of because we do a pretty good job of keeping things confidential. Actually, the internet was probably one of our best things as far as social media, being able to celebrate victories when they're done. Prior to that, word didn't get out very much about a business that was sold. But who I am a father of three. I've been married to my beautiful bride, Leslie, for 38 years, and have three boys, all living in Northwest Arkansas and doing well. And I'm a avid follower of Christ, and want to do what I can to give back to my community here in Northwest Arkansas that has treated me so well. Originally from Southern California, moved here in 1993 and never looked back. We have absolutely loved our time here in Northwest Arkansas and being a part of the Northwest Arkansas community. I currently live I've purchased a small farm in Winslow, and that's kind of where I get to spend my downtime, is enjoying the beautiful nature out there and everything that has to offer.
Yeah, it's beautiful down there.
It is. We've really enjoyed that.
Yep. I got a friend that just bought the Bigfoot. You know what I'm talking about? There's the Bigfoot campgrounds down there.
I think I've been by them.
Speaking of businesses getting bought, yep.
Yeah.
Great guy. So anyway, shout out to Shah. So I had a client that was in this situation where they had, they built up, let's say it's an investment portfolio of properties. They've got 75 doors. They've been running this as a business, and maybe they don't have any heirs, or maybe the kids just aren't interested in taking this on and taking it over. What kind of options are there for people in that situation?
Well, if it's been run like a business, a business broker can certainly handle that. P&L that shows the business assets around that business, the expenditures around that business, the income being derived from that business. So often real estate is a little bit limited in how it can go about being financed. But when you actually have a business that owns real estate as an asset within it, it can be treated as a business loan and rolled into, a SBA type program. Obviously, you have limitations there as well. I think it's like $5.5 million today as far as a cap. Um, but so you certainly have the ability to sell it as one entity and handle it that way. Um, Obviously it could be, if somebody chose to parcel it out, there are so many investors out there today that are looking for good real estate opportunities, and very good real estate agents out there that are willing to help them to figure out what that can look like for them. Um, but if it's treated like a business, that's really where someone like myself as a business broker can come in and help them and deal with that as one entity that's got a good financial program already around established around it, um, and help them handle it that way. Um, My goodness, some people opt to hang on to those kinds of things and put somebody in a management position to operate that and to continue to serve the trust. So the family can continue to benefit the children or siblings in that way. To be honest with you, I've never dealt with the real estate being the primary asset of the business, but certainly I've heard of situations where that's been able to take place.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely would make sense. I mean, you could dispose of it and kind of cash out on all that equity, selling it off piece by piece, or even chunks at a time if you wanted to do it that way. But yeah, if it was all being run under one umbrella company,
Hmm.
then yeah, what let's say, what would that look like for a client? I mean, is it pretty much similar to packaging and selling it as real estate in the real estate market, or what does that business market look like, and how do you structure your listings for that, and then work those deals? What does that look like?
So, in any business opportunity, generally speaking, you're going to have put those businesses or those properties under a housing of such as a corporation or LLC. And so, as business brokers, we have two methodologies. We can do what we refer to as an asset sale, which does not include the actual entity of the corporation, but the assets that are contained within it. And usually it will also continue to have, so if there's a name associated with that business, that would also go, email addresses, all that kind of information is still there with an asset sale. It just doesn't come with the corporate housing around it. But we also have the option of doing what's called a stock sale, in which a buyer is able to come in and acquire uh, the entirety of the business, of those assets that are underneath that corporation. And so it's taken care of in one package. Um, the attractiveness of something like that, sometimes, not having to convert the assets over to a new entity, that the ability to make use of depreciation that may have been deferred. There are many reasons why a stock sale may be attractive in some situations, and so that may be something that would be of interest to a buyer. As within any business, the more structure that is remains in place with the business at the time of the sale. For example, somebody who is intimate with the properties beyond just the owner. So if they've got a property manager in place that knows the properties, knows the people, knows, who's servicing the entities, as far as, grounds maintenance and repairs, that kind of thing. The more of those things that remain whole with the purchase, the more attractive, and the larger the pool of buyers potentially is, because now I have somebody who maybe doesn't desire to buy themselves a job, but it prefers to, basically invest money and manage from above, instead of being the one managing everything. So it just expands your pool of buyers. Certainly if they chose to take on that management role, then that salary that the entity was paying for that role potentially becomes increased value to the purchaser.
Yeah. And then how would you go about valuing a business like that? I mean, obviously we could value the real estate, within kind of the open market. You could get valuations either through appraisals or broker price opinions or something like that. But are there other ways that you could think of valuing that
Yeah,
business?
and again, like I said, I've never actually conducted the sale of the nature of the business being purely real estate. But my assumption would be you're going to have a kind of a twofold appraisal. One, there, like with any business, there's value in the business entity that was created. The management and the revenues being generated from those properties, if treated properly, are a business outside of just the real estate value. And so we regularly, kind of like you have in real estate, we can kind of give a kind of a broker's opinion of what we believe the market will bear for the business outside of the real estate value. But generally speaking, a bank that's going to be acquiring or doing the financing around something like this will have their own uh, valuation entities. And we also make use of them directly as well. So if somebody just wants to get an idea of what the value of their business is, so they can whether or not this is the time to consider selling, we can contract for them to get that kind of valuation and help them answer those questions around their retirement plans.
I mean, so with a different type of business, let's say, a service business, a trade business, or something like that. Are you typically basing that off of a multiple of, the income of the business, whether it's, the terms better than I do, but
Sure.
I've heard EBITDA, and you might just take a moment to explain what these different systems of value are for our audience.
Yes, different businesses have different calculation methods around them. So, like a retail store is going to have a different way of calculating the value than a service entity would. Especially when you consider in a retail environment, you may have considerable inventory that you also have to account for outside of just the performance of the business itself. In the service industry, generally speaking, it's a multiple of what we refer to as the discretionary earnings. And what that is we help the buyer, or excuse me, the seller, to identify those expenditures that they're making within the business that aren't necessary for the ongoing operation of the business. And we refer to those as add backs because they add value to the business. And so the more of those we can help that seller identify, the increased value or multiple that they're able to get for that business. And it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's hiding something. There are very legitimate business expenses that are able to be added back. I often use an example of, if I'm buying a business, for example, my wife was a school nurse for years, and insurance through the school system was very inexpensive. As a business owner, though, I'm able to run my health insurance through the business. Well, if I'm buying it, I probably am going to keep my insurance through the school system. So that would be an expenditure if the previous owner was running their health insurance through the business, I'm probably going to have that as an add back. I don't need to use it in that way. So that income is now usable by me for something else within the business. First of all, is identifying that discretionary earnings, and then depending on, there can be various things that drive the multiple: the size of the business, the market, the difficulty in starting a business like it is, the amount of, when I say difficulty, for example, like a asphalt company, takes significant assets up front in order to perform that service. Whereas in a vent cleaning business, probably not so much. It's the cost of entry is pretty low. So your multiples probably aren't going to be as high as they would be for a business that just has so much higher of a cost of entry.
Yeah. And so, in terms of the multiple, just for people who aren't familiar with that, again, we're looking to take, you're saying discretionary income, right? Discretionary
Correct.
income
Seller's
to
discretionary earnings.
seller's discretionary earnings. Okay. And that could be, again, I've heard the term EBITDA, which is EBITDA. So earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and appreciation, right? So
Mhm.
did I get that right?
You got it right.
Okay. And is there another? There's another one too. So EBITDA is typically for bigger businesses, right?
Generally, your larger business sales are going to use an EBITDA
Okay.
type of value, but your Main Street businesses generally are going to use what we refer to as SDE, or that seller's
Okay.
discretionary.
Okay. So SDE. Yeah. Okay. So basically, you figure out EBITDA or SDE, and then there is a multiple. So you're saying like, well, it's to buy the whole business. It's 2 times earnings or 3 times earnings or something
Right.
like that, right? That's the multiple. So you would say this business earns $300,000 a year to the owner, and it's a 3x multiple. It's a $900,000 purchase.
Correct.
Is that what we're looking at? Okay. Just to bring that back to a real estate situation, are just kind of our imaginary 75 units, and let's say it's making $200 a month on each of those, and so what is that?
Is that 15 grand?
So, yeah, well, 200 a month times 200 a month times 75 is 15 grand times 12, so it's 180,000 a year. So your income is 180,000 a year, but the value of the property is a whole lot more than that. So
Right.
if you were to value that business in that way, would it have to have a really high multiple?
No, generally what you're looking at, for example, when I'm selling any kind of a business that owns the real estate underneath it, you have the value of the business, and then you have, in addition, the value of the asset of the
Oh,
business
okay.
in the form of real estate. So if you have, as the example you gave, 300,000 plus you had, $3.5 million worth of properties, then, that 300,000 is, or case $900,000 is in addition to the value of the real estate.
Okay. Right. So that management piece has its own value that gets
Correct.
added on to the property value.
Correct.
Nice.
And again, I don't, the specific multiples, quite often in those kinds of deals, the size of the deal, the amount of income may drive the multiple value. So, a business that's bringing in, less than $1 million, they have this multiple. One that's over $1 million is going to have a slightly different multiple, just because of scale.
All right. Well, thanks for diving into all this with us. This is actually a really interesting topic that, after several years at REI, I don't think we've actually had this perspective before. So this was kind of a fun scenario to dig into. And for everybody who's listening, we are going to have a main meeting at the Hyatt House in Rogers on May 14th. 2024, where we're going to dig into this with a panel of speakers. And John, you're going to be one of those speakers. But we're also going to have Tim Snively, who's an attorney, and John Juvenot, who is president of BBB Septic. And he's got a large rental portfolio as well as that business. And so, yeah, I think we're going to have some really interesting perspectives on building businesses, building real estate portfolios. I'm interested to hear what Tim has to say about how to structure all of this legally as well. There's a lot that we're going to be able to dive into.
Should be interesting.
Yep. All right. So for our listeners, make sure to attend that main meeting. We'd love to see you there. As usual, it's $20 at the door or $0 if you are an REI-NWA member. And of course, big benefit of the membership is coming to these meetings. We have 4 meetings a month. So all throughout the year, you can come to all of those and network to your heart's content, meet all kinds of interesting people in all different facets of, business and real estate and law and, all the good stuff. You can build your connections, build your network, build your team to give yourself a leg up in whatever goals you're trying to attack. So definitely make sure to attend. Man, John, this was a good one. I think we really dug into some interesting territory here, and I really appreciated having you on.
I enjoyed the conversation as well. Thank you, Cole.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us on this podcast. We'll catch you on the next one.